Hello, Tillie.
Hello.
We're going to start off today talking about healing birth, and Tillie has had an experience of traumatic birth and healing birth, so that's why she's here. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm Sheryl, the healing birth doula, also known as Simply Natal. And Tillie, would you like to tell us a little bit about you, first of all?
Okay, I'm Tillie. Hi. I have 4 children. I am a busy lady. I help running this local sling library, and I'm also a breastfeeding peer supporter. And yeah, as Sheryl said, I've had 2 traumatic births and 1 very healing birth, which Sheryl was a big part of. So yeah, we're here today to have a chat about that.
So if we start with the traumatic birth then, and you don't have to go into too much detail if you don't want to, but kind of just give us a background of how they were traumatic or what that felt like for you.
Yeah, so my first birth was with my twins, who are now 9. I was relatively young, didn't know anything about birth, didn't know anything about children. Found out really early on that I was having twins, so I was under the twin consultant right from the get-go. And it was put to me, with twins, we either do a C-section at 37 weeks or we induce you at 37 weeks. So I decided I would be induced because I didn't want to go through the process of a section, and I wanted to try and have a natural birth. I didn't know that I had choices. I didn't know that I had options. Nothing was put to me that way. So I turned up, was induced. It was all very much out of my control. Looking back, it didn't feel like a discussion about what I wanted to do. I was told, this is what we will do now, this is what we will do, and now this is what we will do. And I had a 49-hour labour, which ended up with an emergency section under a general anaesthetic. So obviously I don't remember anything about my children being born, and I didn't have the easiest time in terms of recovery, but I kind of boxed that birth and got on with life with twins because it was busy and I needed to focus on them. So then when I became pregnant with my now 4-year-old, I knew that I wanted to attempt a VBAC. So I went for my consultant appointment at 13 weeks pregnant, and I was told, you can't have a water birth, you must have continual fetal monitoring, you will be on a bed, these are the rules. And I came out that appointment and went, wow, like I'd envisaged this beautiful water birth, and I was basically had the rug pulled out from under me. So I went away and did a bit of research and found out I do have choices and I can have a water birth if I would like. So I felt really disheartened by the consultant that I'd spoken to at the time, and decided that I would like to attempt a home birth this time around in order to get the things that I wanted that I was being told by the hospital I couldn't have. I felt like I was very informed. Looking back, I was semi-informed, but not as fully knowledgeable as perhaps I could have been. And unfortunately, when I went into, I went into labour because I'd got to, I was creeping towards 42 weeks and the pressure to induce was increasing, and I knew absolutely I didn't want another induction because the one before had been so brutal, and I knew it increased my chances of having a repeat section, so it was off the cards for me. They were putting the pressure on, so I accepted a sweep at the hospital, and the midwife that did the sweep was really brutal. She caused my membranes to rupture, and everything was kind of like domino effect of everything going wrong. One intervention led to another. We started off labouring at home. I was in the pool. Unfortunately, the team that took over as shift changed weren't supportive. They didn't want me to be back at home, and I was kind of carted off to hospital at the first opportunity, really. Looking back, I could have argued with it. I could have stayed at home, but again, I wasn't informed enough. I didn't know that I could have asked for those midwives to leave and for others to attend. I didn't know I could have said no to going to hospital.
Easier said than done anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And my husband was terrified. So as soon as they wanted to take me to hospital, I was taken to hospital. And I didn't have the power of voice at that time to argue it. I was really upset. We got onto the labour ward, and I had a huge panic attack when we arrived because it was the same labour ward that I was on for my twin birth. And everything again, it was just that domino effect of intervention. And unfortunately, it ended in another emergency section after a 39-hour labour this time around. And my memory of my baby being born is me laid in the theatre sobbing because they'd attempted to do forceps. The forceps had failed, so they told me that she would have to come out by a section. And I was just traumatised because I was back in the place that I didn't want to be. I thought I'd really prepared myself to not be in. So when I fell pregnant with my now 1-year-old, I knew that I had to fully prepare myself for all eventualities. But I wanted to make sure I did everything.
So how did you prepare then for your next birth?
So when I found out I was pregnant with my now 1-year-old, I knew I had to do everything in my power to try and achieve the birth that I wanted, but also to ensure that if that didn't happen, I was mentally prepared for that eventuality as well. So I was still undergoing therapy following the trauma of the birth of my 4-year-old. And through the course of my pregnancy, we began EMDR therapy. Previously, I'd done CBT, which had been helpful, but it didn't seem to have really kind of got to the source of what was going on and helped me process the birth. So we did the EMDR therapy, which was revolutionary for me.
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt you, but just for anybody who doesn't know what that is, eye movement desensitization. EMDR. What's the R stand for?
I can't remember.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Eye movement desensitization. So,
yeah. So you talk about the trauma, and as you do that, you follow. My therapist used a pen to do rapid eye movements in different ways. And at first, I was a bit like, "How on earth does that work?" But it does. It genuinely does work.
Yeah.
Or it did work for me anyway. And it got me to the point where we discussed my upcoming birth, and we discussed the perfect birth. We discussed if things went slightly awry and I ended up in hospital, perhaps. We discussed if it did go down the caesarean route again. So we covered all aspects and all possibilities so that I felt at peace if that happened. And I really did feel at peace because I knew that with the preparation I was doing, if I did end up with a caesarean again, it would be because I had to give birth that way. It wouldn't be because it was a catalogue of errors. I prepared myself mentally in that way. I prepared myself physically by attending pregnancy yoga every week. And I also saw my osteopath every 2 weeks from about 28 weeks pregnant. There were slight misalignments in my hips and things, which she said may well have contributed to the previous, because I had misalignment in terms of how the babies were presenting each time. So this misalignment in my hips could have contributed to that. So I wanted to make sure I was covering all bases. So by the time I got to giving birth, I knew that my body was physically in the best possible shape it could be. And I also hired Sheryl as my hypnobirthing coach and did the one-to-one course with Sheryl, with my husband as well, and my friend Kirsty. And Sheryl was brilliant in terms of, we talked about my previous births. We talked about everything to do with the actual physiology of birth, so that I had a really clear understanding of what my body was actually doing whilst I was giving birth, which was incredibly helpful. We covered so many different aspects of birth through the course, all of it really informative and helpful, and obviously talked about how to ensure I was relaxed and breathing well and all those kind of things within birth. So I found that along with everything else that I was doing, I think it was all the pieces of the jigsaw coming together. If I'd have perhaps done one thing, I don't know what would have happened, but for me it felt like I was mentally preparing and physically preparing myself for all eventualities, not just for the perfect birth. But in my head, by the most part, I had the vision of how I wanted my birth to be, and that was what I focused on. Even though we took moments to accept it might not happen like that, I was constantly visualizing this birth that I had in my head that I wanted to achieve.
Oh, amazing. And I was just going to say as well that you actually booked your course with me, I think, before you'd even told anyone you were pregnant, didn't you?
Yeah.
It
I
was
think I
like,
booked it in January maybe with you.
yeah, you were
don't think
a few weeks pregnant. You
I
weren't
think I was
even
maybe only about 8 weeks pregnant. No, I don't think if I was even 8 weeks. I found out I was pregnant between Christmas and New Year. So I think I must have maybe been 6 weeks pregnant when I booked with you. But I knew I needed to do it.
That's it. And it's funny, isn't it? Because I sometimes say that to people when they're unsure about whether to book a course or whatever. That sometimes just doing it, taking that action, even though we didn't start the course until much later, taking that action and then like sending the deposit. It's like, there you go.
You're preparing yourself for the next steps.
Yeah. It's like an energetic thing. It's like saying, right, I've taken this step.
Yeah.
And you know, it's part of me being empowered and trying to do everything I can.
You're telling the universe, this is my path.
Yeah.
You know, so it's taking that step, and it also as well, it sets your mentality in the right place for going forward. This is how my pregnancy is going to go, because this is how I'm preparing for my birth. It is a series of steps that you're taking.
That's it. It's not always just about doing the course and ticking it off and saying, oh, that's done now and boxed. It's kind of jumping into it and really committing yourself in all of the ways. And you really did that. And you were practicing and preparing your birthing space, and you had all those beautiful things that your other daughters had made for you as well and stuck up on the wall, the butterflies and all of that. How did you find the actual hypnobirthing side of things and the practicing the scripts and stuff?
Really helpful in terms of, I think, like I said before, it becomes a way of pregnancy, a way of birthing. It's not just about learning about hypnobirthing and then doing it in your labour. It becomes part of who you are as a pregnant person and who you are as a birthing person. I am a hypnobirther. You know, I am this person. So it's all consuming. It's not just do the course, tick it off, like you said. It becomes part of who you are. So it consumed so much of my life, thinking about my breathing techniques, getting my children to make all the beautiful butterflies because they were what I envisaged with the up breathing. It became such a big part of all of our lives. The kids were probably fed up of drawing butterflies and colouring them in and glitter, and it just became part of their life as well as it was part of my life, preparing that birth space. It became part of who I was and who I am going forward.
And it's part of who I am now as well. And I always explain it to people who are starting the course that it's not like a set of tools, it's not like a toolkit. Sometimes people refer to it as that, and there are tools in it, but that it's more like a philosophy. Like it's actually it's a way that you're choosing to.
That's what I got from you when I was pregnant with the 4-year-old. I read a hypnobirthing book and listened to some tracks, but with you it became a philosophy of life. It wasn't just the tools to get through a birth, it was a philosophy of life.
And has it helped you afterwards as well? Have you continued to think in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely, because it teaches you to question certain things, to understand your power within all aspects of your life. You don't have to take something that one person tells you as gospel. You can go away and you can think about it and you can research it yourself, and you can decide whether you need to take action, or you can decide, if I sit back and say no at this moment in time, what will happen now? You know, there's so much of it that you can take forward because it teaches you so much.
So tell me a little bit about the actual birth then.
Okay, so we had a few false starts. Genuinely thought labour was happening on a number of occasions, and it wasn't. Obviously, we crept towards the 42-week mark, and then we crept over it. And then we kept creeping to the 43-week mark, and everyone was going, do they allow you to go past 42 weeks? And I was saying, do I allow them to intervene with my birth? Because I knew if I was to have any chance of achieving the birth I wanted, I had to be left alone. I knew from past experience, but also talking to other women and other birthing people, that the second you start intervening, that's when the domino effect begins. So even the sweep that has become so normalised that everybody accepts, because that's how we all go into labour, I knew that if I even accepted a sweep, that for my body, like last time, was just that first domino down. So I knew I needed to be left alone. It made all the medics very twitchy. I agreed to go in for monitoring at the hospital, a CTG and a scan every couple of days. They wanted me in every day. I knew that wasn't conducive with me feeling relaxed and therefore able to go into labour. So I made the decision that I would go every couple of days, every 2 to 3 days, for either a CTG monitoring session or a scan. Everything was perfect. If at any stage they'd have said to me, we're concerned about X, Y, Z, I would have reassessed at that point. They had no concerns. I had no concerns. Baby was happy. I was happy. So I was happy to continue for the foreseeable, really. There wasn't a date or a number of weeks that I had in mind to say enough is enough. I was just happy to see how things went and reassess as we went along. So we got to the 43-week mark. That was on the Thursday. And then the Friday morning, I woke up 2 o'clock in the morning, which had kind of been the pattern of the previous false starts. Woke around 2 a.m, lots of surges happening, able to breathe them through at first until eventually I had to get out of bed, was doing my swaying, lots of swaying, eventually lots of swaying. Eventually at some point rang you, Sheryl, said, I think it's time. So you came, we filled the pool, I got in the pool, and as we were getting towards 7:30, I knew the kids would start waking for school and things started dying off a little bit. Got the kids off to school and I was thinking maybe things will pick up again. Still having lots of surges, but just not with the same intensity. And by midday-ish, they've kind of tapered off completely, really. So we went for a walk.
We had a little nap first, I think, didn't we? Or was that?
Yeah, we did actually. Yeah, had a little nap.
And then we went for a walk.
Went for a walk around the block, just to see if we could get things going, but nothing happened. And I felt a bit deflated because we thought the kids would be coming home to their new baby sister, and obviously they weren't going to be doing that. So I said, Sheryl, go home, get some rest. There's no point you being here because nothing's happening. Kids came home from school, and on a Friday evening the twins used to go to football practice. So as we were getting the kids ready, I had a couple of surges. Danny was like, should I go? And I joked, this is just life now, I just contract, you might as well go because it will just be another false start. I'm just going to spend the rest of my life contracting and never having a baby. So Danny went off around 5:45 as I sat at the kitchen table with the then 3-year-old having a few surges. And our normal routine was Danny takes the twins to football, me and Pickle, the 3-year-old, get in the bath together. We have a nice long bath. Then we get onto my bed, have some booby, have some quiet time, and then bedtime kind of as the twins are getting home around 7:15. So we went upstairs, we ran the bath, and I thought, perfect, this bath will just stop these surges. It will just ease them right off, be really nice and soothing. We got in the bath, bam, couldn't get out of the bath. I was like, oh my goodness, I can't get out of the bath. I'm suddenly having these crazy surges that like came out of nowhere. So I had to sit and breathe through several of them before I could gear myself up to actually try and get out of the bath. I had to get out of the bath. It was too cramped. I was in there with a 3-year-old. I couldn't possibly labour in the bath at this point. So I managed to get out of the bath. I then couldn't get the 3-year-old out of the bath because they were just like coming one after another, and they were increasing in intensity.
And did you think at that point, oh, this might be it now?
I was kind of like, is this another false start? Or perhaps because the bath hasn't soothed them, this could be it. So I must have realised at some point it was it, because I rang Danny and I was like, you kind of need to get home now. And he was like, why? And I was like, I think it's on. So we'd already organised that the twins were staying at my parents' house that night. So he quickly got them to my parents and then came home. And I think I'd managed to get Pickle out of the bath somehow at this point. So Danny took Pickle to bed as I rang the midwives. I must have known it was on. Must have known. I rang the midwives. And, you know, my intention was, do not ring the midwives until you need them, because I didn't want to be on anybody's clock. I wanted to get through as much of the labour as possible before I rang for backup, essentially.
Yeah. Well, you hadn't even called me, had you? Bless you.
I hadn't, but I knew I needed the gas and air. That's why I called the midwives.
Well, I just thought, oh, nothing's happening. So I just messaged you when the boys were going to bed. Like, oh, is everything all right? And you were like, I think you should come now. Like, oh, okay.
Sheryl, the midwives are on the way. You kind of need to come. I felt like you literally arrived in about 30 seconds flat.
Well, I think it was pretty quick.
Yeah, you were like creeping around the corner, must have been ready, waiting. So obviously you arrived. Danny had got Pickle to bed, so we were filling the pool, we were getting the birth space ready, making sure that I've got a prepared a birth basket with the towel for the baby, the nappy, the cord tie, the outfit for her to wear. All the stuff was in my birth basket ready. We were getting all the birth space ready. I'm pointing to where we were doing it.
Yeah.
I'm actually sitting. I've just realised I've sat myself in the space.
You're actually right there.
And I didn't plan to do that either. I've just realised. So we were busy sorting the birth space whilst doing lots of swaying. Danny was filling the birth pool, and the midwives arrived at about 9 p.m, maybe just before. So it had taken the midwives about an hour to get to me. And you and Danny took them into the kitchen at my request to prepare them, to let them know kind of where my headspace was, that I kind of didn't want a busy, chatty birth space. I wanted a calm, relaxed, quiet space, because I knew I needed to just be left alone. I needed to be in my cave to just have my baby. And I needed the midwives there for backup. And obviously we'd agreed to the monitoring every 15 to 20 minutes due to it being a VBAC, which I was totally fine with. So the midwives came through to meet me and said, what do you want from us? And I just said, I just want to be left alone, like, not being rude, but don't touch me. I don't want touching. I just need everybody to just leave me alone to have this baby. And they were really respectful. The plan was for them to stay in the kitchen and kind of just come in when we needed them, or to come in and monitor for a few minutes every 15 minutes or so. But actually at that point, I got in the pool and it all just kind of kicked off from there, didn't it? There wasn't any kind of respite in between. I was in the pool, I had the gas and air, and it was just like the steam train was going. There was no...
And I think they pretty much realised as well, when they got there, that maybe you were approaching established labour by this point anyway.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely by the time they got there, I absolutely was in established labour by that point. Obviously I declined to have any VEs in labour. Again, I didn't want touching. I knew that whatever was happening with my cervix was irrelevant, because it could change in the matter of a minute. They could examine me and I could have been 2 centimetres, and an hour later I could have been having the baby. I knew it didn't matter to me. I didn't need to know how many centimetres I was, because it wasn't relevant. I just needed to listen to my body. So we declined any VEs. I got into the pool. Like I say, had the gas and air. We had a kind of couple of positional changes in the pool as I tried to listen to my body and get comfortable as things progressed. And eventually I ended up in the position that I'd started in, which was on my knees in an upright position. Obviously gravity must have been doing its thing, helping. My memory of the labour gets a bit foggy at some point, and I remember coming around at the point where you were telling me, have a drink of your Lucozade, eat some of this chocolate, and I was like, why on earth would I want to eat chocolate right now? I'm trying to have a baby. And I think I thought you were slightly mad, even though I knew, because you'd prepared me for this in the hypnobirthing course, and you'd even given me the snacks.
Yeah, it was the chocolate I'd given you.
The chocolate you'd given me. But at the time, I just thought you were a crazy person trying to get me to eat chocolate at this point, when I was trying to have a baby.
You weren't aware, really, that it had slowed down a bit.
No.
It slowed down, and they were getting bigger gaps between
Yeah.
Actually,
And I think I must have been having a real lull in energy, because I can't really remember. I think I must have been sleepy, energyless, lagging a bit, and you'd obviously realised this, and I hadn't, because I was in it. So at the point at which I had a couple of bites of chocolate and some Lucozade, it feels like I suddenly sprang back to life. My memory suddenly sprang back to life. So yeah, from there, I was looking actually at the pictures and the timestamps on the pictures, and I think there was maybe less than an hour between that and her being born. So I think it really must have, you know, given me the energy and perked my body back up again into a state of, right, we can crack on now. And yeah, so my memory of actually giving birth, I distinctly remember the moment of turning to you all and saying, I can't do this. And you all must have gone, oh, transition. And within, I don't know, minutes of that, I remember looking at Danny and I had like a moment of panic. I could feel her descending. I could feel her head in the birth canal. And obviously that's not something that I'd experienced before. And so it was, it was a moment of panic. And as talking about it afterwards, Danny said to me, you know, that my face in that moment terrified him, because I looked terrified, which obviously then scared him, because he always relies on me being in control of situations, which generally I am. And I think at that moment, he saw the panic in my eyes and it made him panic. But that was over with in a matter of moments. And I distinctly remember saying, after one of the surgeries, when I could feel her head descending, I thought that her head had come out, and I put my hand down to feel and there was no head there. And I remember saying, I can't believe that wasn't the ring of fire, because I genuinely thought it must have been. But with the next surge, it was, and it was over with, you know, in a split second. And then her head was out, and it was that like, oh my God, like this is actually happening. We joke about it all the time, don't we? She came out of my vagina.
Yeah.
You know, it was
that
that moment.
Saying it to you? Do you remember me saying in labour when I whispered in your ear, she's going to come out of your vagina?
Yeah.
And your head, you had the gas and air in your mouth, and you were going, no!
Yeah, because I don't think I'd ever really, as much as I'd envisaged this birth, I don't think I'd ever really allowed myself to truly accept that I could do it, because I'd been so convinced by medics previously that my body had to give birth via cesarean. You know, I'd been told after Pickle's birth, if you have another baby, you must have a planned section. I've been told my body can't do it. It can't give birth naturally. It has to be a section. So I don't think I'd ever really fully allowed myself to believe I could do it. So then actually when I was doing it, it was disbelief. And I remember, like, after a head came out, a real moment of calm in the room.
Yeah.
A real
everybody knew how important it was for you. Yeah. I think when I'd taken the midwives into the kitchen when they first arrived, I basically said to them, listen, this baby has got to come out of her vagina. There's no two ways about it. Yeah. We have to do everything to make sure that this baby comes out of her vagina. Because I knew that that's what everything rested on. Like, it was going to change your life. Is that so? Yeah.
And it was.
After she was born, did Danny tell you I went out into the kitchen? He found me crying in the kitchen.
Oh, he didn't tell me that, actually, no. Yeah. Well, it was, you knew, Danny knew, and obviously the midwives could tell how much effort we'd gone to. We had the pool, we'd got the fairy lights, I'd got all my affirmations that I'd made stuck up all around the shutters here. We'd created my nest, my cave, to have this baby in, the dim lights, the music in the background, the fairy lights, the butterflies on the fireplace. I prepared everything I possibly could. So yeah, when we had that moment of calm, it was like surreal. A real stillness in the room, like everybody waiting with bated breath because the head was out. This baby was going to come out of my vagina. Yeah. And then I remember she turned, and I remember being like, what is going on? So in this moment of stillness and this like calm as we're waiting for this baby to come, me having this like moment as she like totally flipped around and I could feel her moving, which was unexpected. And then with the next surge, out, she was born. And then suddenly she was actually in my arms, which again was just such a surreal moment. I look back now and I still can't quite believe that actually happened, because so many people told me it wouldn't. So many people told me how brave I was to plan this home birth, and so many people were so incredulous that I'd allowed myself to go so far overdue as I had, that actually to get to that moment was just such an empowering, like, pinnacle of everything that I'd been doing for the last 9-10 months. And I said to you the other day, yesterday, when I look back on that moment, I just remember feeling like the ultimate warrior. I felt like the epitome of woman. Yeah. I had done the thing that my body was designed to do, that women have been doing for thousands of years, but I was so convinced I was unable to achieve, and I'd done it. And it was momentous. I've not just done it, I've done it in style. You know, we've got the pool, we've got the lights, we've got me absolutely roaring to get her out, and she was there.
And she made you wait, but you did it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh God.
And she was perfect.
Yeah. And no one touched you, did they? No one touched you or her. You did it. You brought her up to you.
Yeah.
Stayed in the pool for like an hour.
It was more than an hour. I was looking at the timestamps. It was nearly 2 hours we were in the pool for. Yeah. Still attached to her umbilical cord, still attached to her placenta. Just having lots of boob and lots of skin to skin, and yeah, it was amazing.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So it's just been a year, because it was her birthday yesterday.
It was her birthday yesterday. I now have a 1-year-old.
So how are things different for you now compared to before? So
I realised about a week ago, I went for a full body massage. It was the first time I'd left Ophelia, and after having my 4-year-old, I couldn't leave her, because if I left her, she was going to die. That was what terrified me. Even if she was with my husband, he wasn't going to put her in the car seat correctly, or something terrible was going to happen. I couldn't even leave her at home and me go and do something, because something terrible was going to happen, because my brain was in a state of trauma. When I went for my full body massage, like I say, just over a week ago, it was amazing. It was the first time I'd left her, but I felt ready. I knew she was fine with her sisters and her daddy. I had a lovely time. I even went to Morrison's afterwards, and I was fine, because I knew my baby wasn't going to die. I didn't have that state of trauma happening in my head. I could reason everything. I was rational. Life is completely different, because I'm living in a much calmer state. I have the knowledge that I can achieve what I want to achieve. I also have the knowledge that if I hadn't have achieved that, it wouldn't have been down to lack of planning or lack of preparation or medical neglect or anything else. It would have purely been because it had to be that way. So I do believe that even if we'd have ended with another emergency section, I would have processed it in a much healthier way, because of the level of planning that I did. But to have achieved the birth that I knew that I could achieve totally has changed how I view myself. I have a much healthier opinion of myself, my capabilities. And as I say, I am able to go and do things by myself without fear of something happening to the people that I care the most about.
Have you enjoyed your first year with Ophelia in a different way to with your other girls?
I have. It's been with its challenges. Obviously, we've enjoyed it through lockdown. So there's been all the children at home, which has been amazing, because they've not missed anything. You know, they have witnessed all of Ophelia's first milestones through her first year, which has been fantastic. It's been chaos, it's been crazy. But yeah, I feel like I've not missed out on her first year because I've been able to be mindful and present and living in the moments and enjoying the moments rather than being fearful of the moments or fearful of time without her.
Yeah. And what's your relationship like with your body?
Much better. After having my 4-year-old, I hated my body. I think I very much blamed my body for not doing what it should do. I took real issue with seeing the changes in my body. Things like this, obviously the scars from my sections. I have 2 scars. They didn't go back in through the first scar, so I now have 2. And I really despised looking at it. I couldn't even bear my children touching my tummy. You know, the kids come up to you and put their hands on your tummy to talk to you. I couldn't bear them even touching my tummy because it was that instant reminder of, well, that can't do what it's supposed to do. Whereas this time around, I've put no pressure on myself to get my body back to how it was before. Fully accept that my body has completely changed. But it's amazing that it's completely changed and it's done incredible things. So there's no pressure on me to try and make it look how it looked before. Whereas I think I felt that pressure before because that would somehow minimise the scars that I had.
So your kind of body's failure to do its thing, because that's how you'd connected the event with your body.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I totally saw it as being my body's fault for not doing what it was supposed to do. Having had birth debriefs, I realised that the level of intervention actually, oh sorry, it's paused you because my friend's ringing. Hang on 2 seconds.
Okay. So your life is different and your relationships perhaps with all of your children are different, would you say that? Yeah. And a lot has changed for you, but how do you think this sort of birth, this sort of empowered experience of birth would change in a wider sense society, even the world?
I think one of the biggest issues that we face as birthing people is the lack of understanding that we have so many choices. Our voices are often unheard in the birthing space. And I feel that if more birthing people were able to achieve the birth that they wanted, for me, so much of it was about being respected, having my choices respected, and feeling some level of control over what was happening with my body. I talk to my children all the time about bodily autonomy. I let them choose how they have their hair cut. I let them choose the clothes that they want to wear, because it's essential for us, particularly as females in society, to understand that we have control over our own body in terms of consent. And unfortunately, in my experience, and also in the experience of some people that I talk to, that doesn't seem to transfer into pregnancy and the birthing room. And I feel that if more people were able to feel empowered and in control of their birth, it would have a big impact across society, because we would feel more empowered in general if we were allowed to feel empowered about what our bodies can do without so many factors telling us that we can't do it, or we're not allowed to do it this way, or we have to do it so-and-so way, or you can't go past 42 weeks. All of these things that we're told all the time, you're not allowed to do. You can't give birth if your baby's breech. You have to have a cesarean birth. All those things that we're told we can do, you can't do, you're not allowed to do, this has to happen. It's constantly telling us that our bodies can't do this correctly. So it's that constant negative reinforcement in our heads that as birthing people, our bodies can't do it, and we're not capable of making those decisions for ourselves. And that filters then into your whole self-esteem as a person.
Yeah.
And it can impact across the board, make you doubt your power as a person in so many aspects of your life. So if we were able to empower women to have the birth that they deserve and that they're able to achieve, whether that birth is a home birth like mine, whether that birth is a dry birth in hospital, or whether that birth is a planned section, to empower women to achieve the birth that they need to have or want to have by giving them information and options, could absolutely filter into every aspect of their lives.
And I don't know about you, but since my healing birth, it's kind of flipped my whole world upside down, because it makes you start thinking about all of the possibilities, all the things that you can do that you thought you couldn't do before, but maybe I can do this.
Yeah,
And
if
you
I can
start
do
to
that.
see different things available to you in life, and it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes your general outlook different. Would you say that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think after having my 4-year-old, I questioned and doubted my capabilities as a mother as well. I'd always been quite confident with the twins in how I could mother, and I had researched and read information and made that part of how I chose to parent my children. And after having the traumatic birth, particularly with my 4-year-old, it really made me question whether I was even capable of parenting in the way that I wanted to parent, because if I couldn't voice what I needed and wanted in my birthing space, how could I translate that to parenting my children?
Yeah.
And it kind of made me quite lost for quite a while. Having had the healing birth, I feel more strongly than ever that I can pass that to my children. You know, I've got 4 girls. I'm raising them to be strong, bold, independent, confident, exhausting to parent, but females that are going to have confidence to say no, because no is a full sentence.
Yeah.
You know, and if I can achieve the birth that I want to achieve and say no to certain people who want to do certain things in a medical way, then I can translate that to my children and be, I guess, a role model in some ways of, these were my experiences and look what I can achieve. You can do this too in X, Y, and Z in life.
Absolutely. I always draw a parallel because obviously my other personality is my teaching side of things and teaching secondary school students. I always draw a parallel that, you know, if we had students saying to us at 14, 15, 16 that there's no point in them even trying to achieve their life goals, that we would just be like, what? Why would there be no point in you trying to achieve that? Like, you don't know what's going to happen, but you try anyway.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good thing to do. And yet when it comes to birth, so many people say there's no point trying, there's no point having a plan, there's no point trying to achieve this thing, because, you know, I might be disappointed. But that is life, isn't it? We sometimes are disappointed, but we don't necessarily have to be traumatized at the same time.
Yeah. And I think so much of the trauma is linked to feeling like you have no control over what's happening. If you're taken out of the conversation in the birthing room about what's going to happen, you will feel traumatized because you've had no contribution to what's happening to your own body.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I think I might ask you just one last question. If there's someone watching this who's experienced a traumatic birth, what would you like to say to them?
If you've experienced a traumatic birth, it doesn't have to happen like that again. You have the power to control, to a degree, what happens with your next birth. And you also have the power to inform yourself and mentally and physically prepare for your birth. So it may not go to plan next time, but you can be in control of that and in control of how that impacts your life.
I think sometimes we just need to hear from other people that this is possible. I know that when I was looking to have another baby, I needed to know before I got pregnant that this was possible, that I could do this again and it would be different next time. And sometimes it's so hard to believe, but when we hear it coming from people, real life people who've had this experience, it's sometimes really comforting to hear.
Yeah, it is, and it's not something that we discuss enough as society. There's a lot of people that I know that probably had no idea really that I'd had two traumatic births until when I had Ophelia. My Welcome to the World post explained, I think in minor detail, that she was an HBAC, which is a home birth after cesarean, and that she was also our rainbow baby. So I don't think we talk about it enough in society. I'm probably as guilty of that as anybody else because we are traumatized by it. So actually we don't know how many people, just how many women are affected by traumatic births. And also
sometimes they don't know themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, until we start talking about it and they talk about how they feel and actually recognise that that was a traumatic birth. But then we don't know just how achievable it is to have a healing birth because, again, we don't talk about it.
Yeah. But, you know, we're on that mission, aren't we? I think both of us. Encouraging and helping people to have those healing births after trauma because we know the difference that it can make.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for talking to me and for sharing your story for other people to see it and hopefully get some hope from that for themselves and confidence as well. And you're amazing. And
are you?
I'm going to go and have a little cry. So thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye.